It depends, is how I could answer this one. Can ChatGPT do SEO for me? So let's be upfront. ChatGPT is very powerful, it's impressive, and also faintly scary in many such ways. But its SEO knowledge is broad yet shallow. It is very good for some things, very specific asks and augmenting existing knowledge, but it isn't good enough yet at insightful analysis or providing nuanced advice. It misses vital context. Questions such as, tell me what is wrong with this page, or tell me why my page isn't ranking, could be answered, possibly. It will think it does it right. But anything that requires additional information or data points, it will answer authoritatively, but the advice will be generic and generally unhelpful. An AI with the right inputs and the right questions and the right data can be very powerful for SEO. The potential is there, but ChatGPT as is not that product. So can you kick back whilst ChatGPT does all the hard work for you? It depends, could be the answer to this question. I fixed all these crawling issues. Will my rankings improve? Well, a crawling issue is something that slows or completely impedes how search engines discover pages on your website. You think of very complex web structures, poor internal linking, spider traps, anything that keeps bots away from the content you want or need to be ranking falls under this category. So fixing them is good. It reduces the amount of crawling that is needed, it speeds up the process, it ensures the good stuff can be found. But if you help search engines see more of your site, will they like what they find? Reducing friction is great and all, but if you still have a content problem, all you're doing is making it easier for search engines to see something that they may not want to index. So you need to fix these problems, but this alone will not help you if you have other more fundamental issues. So I fixed these crawling issues. Will it make my rankings improve? It depends. Is this really the most appropriate answer to every SEO question? Well, yes and no, but it's become a meme response for some and a lazy get out for others. SEO is a complex field, and those who don't understand it generally ask questions that there is no easy answer to. But even if the answer does depend on context or factors, simply saying it depends does not answer the question. So you should either ask for more context or frame the answer within the most appropriate context to that situation based on your experience. Now, in most scenarios, answering a question with "it depends" will not make you popular, no matter how true this is. And this is the case for all subject experts, not just SEOs. So how are you going to answer that complex yet important question in your next meeting? It depends is the most frequent answer to the question, will fixing hreflang issues improve my traffic and rankings? Hreflang. So, the purpose of hreflang tags are to help search engines understand which content is meant to be ranked in what region and in what language. Now, the greatest benefit of this is for people with pages in different regions but the same languages, or within regions where often the wrong web pages rank. So if you don't already have this problem, hreflang provides some additional and well-needed clarity, but it doesn't specifically fix an issue or drive rankings or traffic directly. For those with websites serving the wrong content in the wrong region, or if you have websites in the same language that are effectively competing with one another, yes, there is some benefit that could be had here. So, will fixing hreflang issues improve my traffic and rankings? It depends is the answer to the following. Should I do what an SEO blog post tells me to? Well, you need to understand a few things first. Firstly, sites are complicated. The advice that a blog may give may not be appropriate to your circumstances, so does it take context into account? 2. Advice can become outdated quickly. Is what you're reading published within the last 6 months or a year? If not, this advice may not be applicable. 3. Corroborate with the advice from other sources. If this is the only place where you've seen this advice, it is riskier to follow it because it is unproven. And then 4, you have to check that it is proven, especially if there are new case studies. Is there enough out there to convince you that it's a repeatable result that will help you? So think about this another way. Would you make a modification to your car based on the advice of one person and expect to be reliable and to get a desirable outcome? Possibly not. Some blogs are ahead of their time. Some of this advice can be truly great, but this is less often the case. You need to do more research yourself first. So, should I do what an SEO blog post tells me? It depends would be a fair answer to this question. Does Twitter need SEO? In another self-inflated injury, Twitter recently blocked tweets from non-signed-in users and Google in the process. Now, this led to a 32% drop in visibility within 24 hours, which for a site like Twitter equals a huge drop in the amount of people who are likely to see them from search results. But does this matter to Twitter? Isn't everybody already on the app, and why should a social network at all care? Now, ignoring the state of Twitter at the moment, Google provides a valuable door for old and new users for re-engagement. Even if this traffic isn't as good a quality, visibility from the world's largest search engine, which is effectively free at this stage, is worth a lot. Twitter is also in no position to throw away ad impressions or make itself look any more chaotic right now, which is what the snafu has ultimately done. Now, whilst at the time of recording the issue seems to have been corrected, the lesson is clear. If you stop Google from crawling and indexing your content, you will not be served in search results. So, does Twitter need SEO? It depends, is the answer to the following. Should I do what an SEO blog post tells me to? Well, you need to understand a few things first. Firstly, sites are complicated. The advice that a blog may give may not be appropriate to your circumstances, so does it take context into account? 2. Advice can become outdated quickly. Is what you're reading published within the last 6 months or a year? If not, this advice may not be applicable. 3. Corroborate with the advice from other sources. If this is the only place where you've seen this advice, it is riskier to follow it because it is unproven. And then 4, you have to check that it is proven, especially if there are new case studies. Is there enough out there to convince you that it's a repeatable result that will help you? So think about this another way. Would you make a modification to your car based on the advice of one person and expect to be reliable and to get a desirable outcome? Possibly not. Some blogs are ahead of their time. Some of this advice can be truly great, but this is less often the case. You need to do more research yourself first. So, should I do what an SEO blog post tells me? It depends. Could be the go-to answer for the following question. Can I teach myself everything I need to know about SEO? So the SEO industry is generally quite generous with the knowledge it shares. You can find a lot about SEO online, but knowing what is good and what is not good is quite challenging. This is where sites like learningseo.io can be a massive help to structure your education. But is this alone enough to be self-sufficient? I'd argue not, and I'd say the missing ingredient here is experience. Most SEOs get experience on the job, but for those learning, there is no substitute for creating your own website and putting your skills to the test. Now, what most guides won't teach you is how to put all of your knowledge together and know what is most important and when. Prioritization, communication, organization, and more also make a great SEO. So, can I teach myself everything I need about SEO? It depends, is how you could answer this one. Do I just have to write helpful content to rank well in Google? Well, first, let's assume we're just talking about content, not technical SEO or links. Otherwise, it's an instant no. You do need all of these things. Google has been emphatic that writing content for users, not robots, is what you need and has done so for some time. But objectively, defining helpful content is hard. Helpful content is entirely dependent on the searcher's context. Now, most marketers focus on what makes money rather than what is helpful, and they struggle to draw a link between the two. This will heavily impede you from producing truly helpful content. But helpful content can still rank well, which does undermine the whole approach in many ways, and it can make it much harder to get the buy-in. Now, the Search Quality Rater guidelines do provide a window as to what Google believes is helpful, so I strongly advise you read that, but you have to understand what is truly helpful to your customers throughout their journey, even before and after they find you. So, do I have to just write helpful content to rank well in Google? It depends. Sums up the feelings around the following. Do I need to learn Python to succeed at SEO? Well, there's been a strong drive for SEOs to learn more non-SEO skills over the last few years. Python in particular was championed by many, one of the leading legacies of Hamlet Batista, who I think could be widely credited as kickstarting this movement. But learning Python enables SEOs to build tools, analyse data and speed up processes. This can all be very useful and a hugely empowering process. But is it essential for SEO? Most dedicated SEO roles in-house or agency side do not require Python skills, development skills, or anything similar for that matter, but a working knowledge of HTML and JavaScript should be enough to make you a good SEO. Now, if you are a freelancer or a consultant, the additional skills may give you an edge or boost your profitability, but these are added extras, not the norm. For those who have a passion or an interest to learn on top of their day job, these things are something I'd strongly advocate as these signify an investment in your career, but I would argue they are not essential. So, do I need to learn Python to be good at SEO? How do I get to know my knowledge gaps in SEO? Now, you don't have to answer this as it depends, and here's why. But the key to this entire process is to adopt a stance where you get to be honest with yourself and open to investing more time and filling in knowledge gaps. The flip side, though, is you've got to be kind to yourself and not give yourself a good kicking because you think you're terrible at it all. Now, in terms of identifying the gaps, I've adopted a self-assessment framework where you can measure your own confidence against common SEO tasks. You need to rank yourself based on how you think you measure up. Now, to be honest, this process is self-assessment. Scoring yourself 10s across the board gets you nowhere, and being deluded is almost as bad as being crippled by imposter syndrome. So if you think this looks useful and you want to assess your own skills, check out the link above or in the comments. I think you'll find it useful. So the next time someone asks you, when I migrate a website, will I always lose traffic? You don't just have to answer with "it depends." Hear me out. With the right planning and resource, this kind of activity does not have to lead to a loss in traffic, because losses come when things get missed, recommendations aren't implemented, or cuts in content are made. These are all extensions of business decisions around timelines, capabilities, getting organised, and what it is you are actually allowed to do. Now, some traffic losses which are known and managed aren't always bad, they're expected, as long as you have consensus up front. And if you are projecting losses based on a migration, this is in reality because you're anticipating sacrifices on implementation, you don't expect you can maintain what currently works, or previous decisions from a technological perspective may actually hobble the new site when it's deployed. So, the next time someone asks you, does Google changing its user agent make any difference to me? Now, you don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. The user agent, they're the details that the servers use to identify who or what is requesting a URL. So it could be you using Chrome on your iPhone, or it could be Googlebot crawling all the way from California. Now, if you have a CDN or a WAF on your website that blocks or limits bot requests, you need to make sure it isn't blocking or limiting any of Google's by accident. You also want to be sure that if you do treat Googlebot differently from other users for any reason, then that is working as anticipated. Now, when Google changes its user agents, you need to be confident that your CDN or WAF is updated so you do not accidentally block or limit Google. Now, Google have also recently differentiated user agents of tools like the Fetch and Render in Google Search Console from their main Googlebot, and these are often treated differently by CDNs. So are you confident that they both get treated in the same way so you can use them to accurately test? Now, if you're not sure if any of this is relevant to you, it can't hurt to check in with IT and ask that question. So the next time someone asks you, how useful are SERP fluctuation tools? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Now, there are many different tools out there that can monitor SERPs, and at a large scale too, and they will tell us when search results are changing more aggressively from a day-to-day basis. Now, these charts can sometimes be useful to understand if any ranking changes may be unique to you or part of a wider change. That said, it's becoming increasingly common to see fluctuation tools showing one thing and then your data telling you something totally different. As a rule of thumb, if you have seen big drops or rises and the tools aren't registering much for change, the issue is probably you or your site. If, however, you're seeing big changes in your data and these tools, then the issue is most likely related to some wider algorithmic changes. You cannot rely on these tools to explain away your problems, though. So the next time someone asks you, what is a good bounce rate? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Now, most people assume a bounce isn't inherently a bad thing, but it lacks important context about a few key areas: who the user is, what they're trying to do, and where they have come from. Now, for example, if you have paid for a user to land on your page and you hope they spend their money, then a bounce is a bad thing. If a user has Googled your company name, found your phone number, called you, but bounced in the process, then actually bounce isn't a negative in that situation. Now, a good bounce rate is better than your benchmark, so it's better than you were, or perhaps better than your competitor's comparable landing page. Just do not use site-wide bounce rates in isolation to gain any real insight, as they're generally unhelpful without finding additional data to validate what is going on and whether that is a good or a bad thing. So the next time someone asks you, do I need to listen to everything Google tells me about SEO? Now, you don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Up front, if you're someone who chooses to ignore everything Google tells you, then you really need to be good at testing everything yourself and being prepared for some significant issues. We simply have to trust them at some things. Now, Google has every incentive to give us accurate technical advice for sure, because it helps more effectively crawl and index the web. If we don't get it right, it costs them, and they get it wrong more often. Now, most of the more specific answers and questions or advice that Google gives SEOs broadly is accurate, but only useful in a given context. Most of the questions that get asked are either not that great or very hard to answer, or simply people like to twist the results and apply it to something that just isn't applicable. Now, this isn't to say that this information isn't useful, but we really have to pay particular attention to the context behind the question and the nuance in the answer. If it feels vague or not applicable to you, it probably isn't. So the next time someone asks you, how fast should my website be? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, whilst setting a target for page speed can be a worthwhile activity, arbitrary targets can often miss the point and cost you a lot. Measuring page speed is a challenge, and whilst there are many different ways to do this, the Core Web Vitals initiative is often a good place to start. But even when you've picked your method of measuring, what are you aiming for? 100 on 1 out of 100? Green? Under 2 seconds? What? Now, some people often just default back to as fast as possible. Whilst being a noble goal, it's a really poor way of directing time and resources, and often is not very good at focusing on, results and efforts that yield a good return. Now, I like to think of this as being better than your competition. So Redico has a free page speed tool that helps you compare the performance of pages around a given keyword, so you can find out for something that's important to you, are you the fastest or the slowest, and where do you need to improve? So the next time someone asks you, does an XML sitemap help rankings? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, an XML sitemap shows search engines where to find your content. If a search engine sees a URL in the sitemap that it hasn't seen before, it may take this as an indication to go and crawl it. But inclusion into a sitemap is a suggestion and not something that passes authority. And the main reason behind this is SEOs have abused sitemaps in the past, tried to manipulate the signals that are in there to mislead search engines. So because of this, these are treated as an indicator only. If you want your page to be crawled and indexed quickly, then linking to it prominently within the website will do what it needs to. Inclusion into the sitemap will help, make sure you don't miss anything. And for more complicated and larger websites, it can be more efficient on the crawl budget. So the next time someone asks you, should I go to Take It Offline Bulgaria? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, making connection with others in your industry is such a fantastic way to strengthen your knowledge and broaden your own contacts. I've invested a lot of my own time getting to conferences, speaking, making connections, sharing ideas, etc. All of it's hugely worthwhile, and I strongly suggest you do that. But TIO as an unconference means you have the expertise, experience and peers in one place, but the intimacy means you're closer to everyone else. You have a chance to get stuck in, make connections more meaningful, and ultimately help build your own career. So what I would advise for this process and similar, you get out what you put in. So invest in yourself, have a great time in the process. So the next time someone asks you, I can see a worse page doing better than me, what can I do? Well, you don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, whilst it can be incredibly frustrating when you see other pages performing better than yours and you perceive them to be worse, there's often a number of reasons behind this. Firstly, maybe there are other quality signals that you can see which are making the difference. Perhaps you're just more fond of your website than your competitors and you feel like you should be entitled to do better. Maybe this page is worse and it will get hit in the future, but it just hasn't happened yet. Google is constantly switching things up and changing how it judges websites, so it may still happen. Whatever the reason, though, this kind of whataboutery is super unhelpful, whether you feel it's justified or not. The best thing you can do is focus on making your pages and experiences better. And if Google isn't reflecting that in search results yet, assume that you need to give it more time, or maybe you need to switch things up a bit. Just getting salty about the bad stuff, as easy as it is to do, isn't going to help you. So the next time someone asks you, what's more accurate, rank trackers or Google Search Console? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, as Google Search Console shows average rankings and rank trackers show the ranking position on a given date and time, they're tracking similar yet different things. Google Search Console's dealing in averages means it's representative of how all users have viewed those search results in that given sort of window that you're looking at, no matter on the device type or country that you select. Rank trackers give a less accurate appraisal of how everyone has seen it, but it does check very specifically the rankings in the same way each time at a pre-agreed sort of window. So it does remove the ambiguity of that average. GSC's average position tracking gives you an idea of generic visibility really well, how behaviours change over time, but is less good at giving specific insight. Whereas rank trackers can give specific insight but can't paint the broader picture as well. Both are useful together as long as you understand what each is and isn't tracking. So the next time someone asks you, how do I get one of those 3D printed things? The It Depends speech bubble you may or may not have seen. Does it depend? No, not this time. Bit of a shock. It's really simple. I just want you to send me your It Depends SEO or internet marketing question. And you can either do that by commenting on this video or dropping me a message on Twitter or LinkedIn at Chris Green SEO. And if I select your question to make a future video on, I'll send you one of these in the post. Really very simple. So, the next time someone asks you, what are the best SEO metrics to report on? You don't have to answer this question with "it depends," and I'll show you why. Now, to help people with this question, I have created what I like to call the SEO metric chain. It basically arranges all of the key SEO metrics from left to right. The key principle on this is that if you start on the left with the technical metrics, if you do not see positive signs here, you will not see positive signs on those metrics on the far right, which include organic transactions and revenue, which everybody wants. The principle behind this process is you work your way up the chain from left to right, seeing how one impact is measured in one metric and then along the chain on there. So pages need to be indexed for revenue eventually to be made. And what I've done is I've visualised this from left to right from the distance from financial value. So those metrics on the left are purely technical, and technical stakeholders will be more interested, and those issues at the right are financial value, and that is ultimately where those stakeholders will want to see it. So the next time someone asks you, do I need to worry about crawl budget for my site? You don't have to answer "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Now, crawl budget as a concept is a kind of thing, but not a specific number or something that we can explicitly measure or should be all that worried about. We do need to be worried about and aware of how much of our site search engines can crawl and index effectively. Now, the larger, the more complex your website is, the more you need to worry about this. Things that might confuse or inhibit crawlers and spiders are more likely to cause ranking issues. Google says anything under 10,000 pages don't have to worry about crawl budget, but I tend to find that actually over 1,000 pages you should at least be aware of and try to fix those issues as a higher priority. Anything over 100,000 pages, for example, I think this becomes critical to probably one of your key focuses within SEO. Amongst all else, focus on reducing friction for search engines, no matter the size, not on how we might score and measure unmeasurable metrics. So, the next time someone asks you, how do I measure the impact and success of an SEO campaign? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Keywords here are impact and success. First is understanding the impact of search engine traffic and what it could mean to a website. Second, what influences the success of the business or the individual who runs it. From there, work back from that success metric and identify 3 to 5 metrics that will all contribute and feed into that. So traffic, sales, customer satisfaction, returning custom, marketplace position, for example, could all count towards one single percentage growth figure you could be aiming for. Once you understand these things, you might need to identify the metrics that best reflect these and measure them. These are likely to be things like organic sessions, sales, customer sentiment in reviews, returning user revenue, search visibility against the competition. In my recent video, I covered the SEO metric chain, which gives more insight into these SEO metrics and how they interconnect. This may help you. So the next time someone asks you, what keywords should I focus on? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Keyword selection is considered an entry-level SEO task, but it's often one of the most challenging to get right. There are many angles to this, but here's one approach that will hopefully feel the most intuitive. Think of the content or product that you have. What purpose does that serve, and what can it help people with? The keywords you select need to be focused on solving that problem. For example, if you're selling products, focus on the keywords around the specific products, not best of product search terms or how to use product search. They're not as relevant at that point. And if you want to produce that content too, then great. But there's no point selecting a keyword just because you want it if you don't have the content or the reason to rank for it. Remember, you need to be the best result for each keyword you want to target. So the next time someone asks you, will links still matter in 2 years? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. Now the short answer is most likely yes, but we can't be 100% sure. Links are the foundation of how Google discovers new content, helps to understand the value of content and rank it appropriately. This was a particularly good way of providing valuable content to users than was otherwise available at the time. But in the time since, links have been easy to manipulate, industrialise, and Google has had to act in ways to counteract that. One of these ways is to create other ranking signals that help illustrate value other than just links. But links are still used today, and so are other ranking factors, which gradually dilutes the importance of links. Links can and should be used as a signal, but we need to focus more holistically on all of the signals that we can influence. So the next time someone asks you, how do we identify the point of diminishing returns for on-page speed optimizations? You don't have to answer with "it depends," and I'll tell you why. This is a difficult one. So maybe we should consider where this approach most often goes wrong. What do you need to be faster than in order to provide a great experience for your customers? Most diminishing returns on performance optimizations are focused too heavily on getting a perfect or near perfect scorecard, which is often quite arbitrary. Maybe we just need to provide the best experience they can get from you and from your competition. I'm not doing down the user, but a perfect experience is going to be expensive and often needlessly so, but better than your competition draws a line in the sand and is often much more approachable. So the next time someone asks you, can paid and organic search work well together? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. The difference between paid search and organic search feels massive to us as an industry, but to the user, it's often the difference between a few pixels, and maybe something they're not even aware of. We care about this distinction more than anyone else. Most people believe that paid search and organic search should work well together, but they're often run by different teams. They're reported on in separate silos, and more often than not, they end up competing with each other. This helps no one. Where possible, report on these channels together, understand your costs and visibility across both, and then you can really start to understand if you're driving incremental revenue or not. So the next time someone asks you, is X SEO the next biggest thing? No? Well, you don't have to answer, it depends, and I'll tell you why. New approaches to SEO are fairly common and they come and go, but they're them really the next big thing. Talking about things like programmatic SEO, semantic SEO, JavaScript SEO, Edge SEO, AI SEO, you get the idea. Now, experienced SEOs may get frustrated by a lot of these. New SEOs or non-SEOs may see them as quite alluring, attractive, or maybe even the winning move. But who's right? Very often, these approaches just detail different ways to essentially solve the same problems or get to fundamentally the same goal. They hint towards a new method, a different platform, or even an emerging technology. But the fundamentals of them are essentially the same. So shall we abandon these phrases? No, they can help summarize concepts quickly. Does that mean that these methods are always transformative or the next big thing? Possibly not. So, the next time someone asks you, do search engines shape the web? You don't have to answer, it depends. And I'll tell you why. Yes, they do. For years now, search engines have offered one of the most accessible doorways to the web, and only relatively recently has that dynamic been changed by various social media and apps. Simply put, if you want to benefit from search engine traffic, you need to create content in a way which can be read and judged by that search engine. Now, does this mean they're creating a homogeneous web? Yes, possibly. Does it mean that actually there's also a lack of creativity that runs alongside that? It's not just the search engines that limit or restrict what we do. It's the advice that we follow and the content and the websites we create. But we have to accept for all of the negatives that we could associate with this, the positives that come from these standards and these approaches far often outweighs it. Search engine standards are often best practice and best for users as well. So if you want to disagree and do your own thing, then you of course can. There's literally nothing stopping you. But if you want to do your own thing and still profit from search engine traffic, then things are going to be a bit tricky for you. The next time someone asks you, is an SEO audit always a good thing? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, audits and SEO divide opinions depending on where you work and who is delivering them. There's too much noise, they can be too hard to follow, or they provide recommendations that are almost unimplementable. Now, before you get an audit, ask yourself if you know the problem you're trying to solve. If you have no SEO resource in the business, chances are you don't know what you don't know. So an audit plus guidance to implement may actually be what's needed. If you do have a better understanding, however, then why is it that you're going wrong or you feel there's a problem? Maybe you don't have the resources to execute and deliver on the changes that are needed. Think about writing additional content or making technical changes to the platform. Now, an audit itself cannot solve those problems, and if you think those are your problems, then I would avoid an audit. Also, an audit without a deeper context or understanding of the business may not often be that effective. It can give you a great understanding of your site and the marketplace, but that won't drive change by itself. So, the next time someone asks you, how do I make the most of an SEO audit? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. In SEO, benefits only become real when realised. Change has to happen following an audit, or you're just wasting everyone's time and money. I would advise to cut this off at the start. You need to be confident of the following things before even commissioning an audit. Firstly, can you get the budget and resources to make the changes? Far too many fall over because that simply is not the case. Will this audit have prioritised actions based on your business's goals and how SEO can fix them? And then finally, do you have the skills and knowledge to actually do the work? And I wouldn't always assume people do. Implementational support is often needed. Now, take the time to find this out and ensure you can give the context of the business and goals to whoever's conducting the audit. This will help them effectively prioritise the work and forecast the potential uplift, which will get more buy-in for implementation, and you're more likely to get it done. The next time someone asks you, will AI kill SEO? You don't have to answer, it depends. And I'll tell you why. The latest wave of generative AI is broadly being looked at either speeding up processes or reducing human costs. So this will impact SEO, right? Well, certain tasks are going to be heavily shaped by generative AI and just AI more broadly in its other forms. But you currently need an SEO to still wield those new tools. For now, a lot of data we consume via tools today is already being heavily shaped by AI and machine learning and is already informing our daily practice. But replacing SEOs or killing SEO is contingent on models which have access to more SEO data and having the ability to actually act and implement on this. Tools like SEMrush, Conductor, BrightEdge, etc. are going to be pretty close to this, or at least really well positioned to make advantage of it. They are the most likely to disrupt SEO. But a total replacement of SEOs by our robot overlords is not here yet. Being able to complement the work that AI can do today is crucial, and it will ensure you are able to ride the crest of this wave rather than get sucked under. The next time someone asks you, can I successfully forecast SEO traffic? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, SEOs don't like forecasts because they're often inaccurate, positioned, and used wrongly. But this isn't exclusive to SEO. We're trying to model a future scenario based on what we do know, and whilst doing so, it's important to acknowledge what is unknowable whilst making the assumptions behind this forecast clear. Now, forecasts need to pass the sniff test. They need to appear intuitive to the audience and feel credible. So because of this, don't be afraid to post different assumptions and show how they impact the end forecast. What also helps is position this as a future scenario rather than a guarantee. No forecasts are perfect, and they should not be thought of as such. And as data becomes more available, reforecast and recommunicate that. So, the next time someone asks you, how can SEO help or detract with web accessibility? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, SEO has typically had a role to play with web accessibility, but historically made things worse via keyword stuffing elements to a web page that will directly impact some people's ability to experience the website. The damage here is those who rely on things like screen readers to describe what is on the page can often simply find things incomprehensible. Now, SEOs are in the unique position to help, as we do have the tools and the ability to see these components of a web page that the majority of other teams do not. There is a duty, at least at minimum, to ensure we're not actively making people's experiences worse. Now, there are some active steps you can take to make things better for both accessibility needs and search engines. For example, well-structured headings, making sure that it's clear what the page is about and so people can actually understand it, including transcripts for videos and closed captions, can all be super beneficial. And the gold standard that we can all aspire to is for SEOs to have a working knowledge of web standards like WCAG and ARIA. So the next time someone asks you, what ranking changes can I expect? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Once SEO changes are planned, everyone always wants to know the impact they can expect. So here are some points to help set those expectations. How significant are the changes? If you're planning optimizing content, you may expect some modest gains, but they might not be that revolutionary. Whereas adding net new content, which is useful, or making significant technical changes that impact the entire site, can have a lot more potential, and you can be more optimistic. Now, if you're just moving pixels around the page or making small incremental changes, you need to monitor this as part of the wider program of long-term best practice, which may compound over time. Individually monitoring each incremental action will be frustrating, and it may undermine your program. Now, there are always exceptions, but you can't bank on or set expectations on the exceptional unless you have a really high degree of confidence there. So the next time someone asks you, is fixing all technical issues important in SEO? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. If I'm given the opportunity to fix something versus not fixing it, then, well, of course, I'd fix it every time. But this assumes you operate in a space which has no limitations on time, budget, and expertise. If this is you, congratulations, you're in tech SEO nirvana. Now, the rest of us, we have to deal with limitations. And in fact, great technical SEO places as much emphasis on how you navigate these limitations as in making the recommendations in the first place. So frame your approach by thinking, it's technically wrong, but is it worth fixing? And based on what you know, what data you have, is getting a clear score sheet worth the effort? Will you see the results out of the tail? So, the next time someone asks you, how can I see what Google is looking at when viewing my website? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, technical SEO has a fundamental need to see what Google sees when viewing your website, but what we see through our browsers may not be what Google sees. Whenever a human via a browser or a bot accesses a website, it provides a user agent string. Now, this user agent string sometimes alters the behavior of the web server and what it sends back. Now, you can change your user agent string to Googlebot in your browser or tools like Screaming Frog or Sitebulb, and this is enough to fool some sites into thinking you're Big G and showing you their content you show Google. But anyone using a major CDN may be validating that you are the genuine Googlebot rather than an imitator. So the most reliable way to check the actual user bot is using the Google Search Console Inspect tool or potentially Google's Structured Data Testing tool. So the next time someone asks you, is rank tracking for AI chatbots useful? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. In SEO, we rely on rank tracking to measure our progress of keyword rankings over time in search engines, so where our website ranks for any given key term. Now, AI chatbots like ChatGPT are starting to send more and more traffic to websites that get recommended as part of their returned answer. Can we track our rankings there? Most chatbots based on large language models are probability based, with a bit of variance included. What this means is the same question isn't always going to receive the same answer. I ran a limited test with 4 different AI chatbots. I asked 5 different questions 3 times and found that, well, the answers aren't that frequently 100% the same, and in the worst case scenario, about 36% similar, which isn't good enough for reliable rank tracking. Now, there are some other ways you can do chatbot rank tracking that could be made in the future, but not in a way that I think would be useful today. So the next time someone asks you, are Google experts at SEO? You have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, whilst SEOs are obsessed with ranking in Google, you might expect that Googlers could also be experts in ranking in their own search engine. Maybe not really. Firstly, 180,000 people work there, and the vast amount of them have zero input into how search results work, and probably don't even know what SEO is. Of those people who do work directly in search, nobody there knows exactly how all of the components work together. And within that, even fewer people within Google have the same job as an SEO does. There are maybe a handful tops. They build and maintain a search engine. They're not paid to rank sites in their own search engine. So, the next time someone asks you, is JavaScript good for SEO? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, JavaScript used to be a real pain for Google. It struggled correctly to see the page content as intended. But Google is getting better at handling JS now, so is it safe for us to use? Well, yes and no. A site that is well built and uses JavaScript to render page content in a timely and error-free fashion can do what you need it to do. It can work just as well as it should. But a poorly optimized front end that requests too many resources or has crucial files blocked or significant console errors can all stop Google rendering a page correctly. Plus, not all search engines and AI content scrapers are as good with JavaScript either. So, the next time someone asks you, should keyword search volume always guide and lead my SEO? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. Now, search volumes, whilst useful, are not perfect. They most often look into the past rather than provide a prediction of the future. And there is also some pretty compelling evidence that they can be super inaccurate at times too. Now, this is a good resource and it can really help you steer and prioritize your efforts, but you have to understand your users, their journey, and how your products, brands, or services will feature within that. Now, if your research suggests that certain content is needed during the customer journey, but it's showing no or low search volume in an SEO tool, I'd still push forward for it anyway. Remember, search volumes can be old, and you could be servicing a growing need, so it's best getting in there before your competition, rather than after. So the next time someone asks you, should I always trust my data? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. So firstly, there's a natural tendency for people to just trust numbers. For example, whatever's reported in Google Analytics, third-party tools like SEMrush, or even your own tools is somehow the truth and should be treated as such. I would say all tools present a version of the truth, but could be limited or manipulated by how data is measured, captured, processed, or visualized. One of my favourite examples from this came from Google Analytics, and that's finding bounce rates of impossibly low standards. This was because the tracking code was installed twice, therefore reducing the number of actual bounces. In a microcosm, that's kind of frustrating, but it taught me the fallibility of that data. This kind of thing can happen to any tool. If you watch closely enough, you will see it happen. Paid tools or free ones, provided by Google or others. The truth that tools provide is an essential truth to have, but if the data is behaving in a way that is impossible, maybe it's first to check that the measurement and processing is wrong before you start to panic. So, the next time someone asks you, Will two businesses targeting the same geographic location within the same company compete with each other? You don't have to answer with it depends, and I'll tell you why. The answer is broadly yes and no. A lot will depend on how your specific customers search and what the competition in that area is. If you have a city-level search and several different locations within that city, there is a strong chance that you'll compete, but most often those businesses nearer to the user will rank higher, certainly within the local results. So you can try and create a city or an area page which links to all of your businesses within that area. Sometimes these pages can rank organically when someone is either searching out of area, or it can rank in place of the local pages but within the standard organic results. However you do this, I would invest in hyper-local optimization on each page and make each one specific to the locations and landmarks near them, as well as including information around teams, photos, opening hours, reviews, etc. Link to the other locations within the area if you can, in case the user lands on the wrong location, and to help Google understand that they are related. This is never going to be perfect, and we do have to rely on Google's geographic targeting to some extent, but if you follow the above steps, you should do well. So the next time someone asks you, is right now the most exciting time to be working in SEO? You don't have to answer if it depends. I'll tell you why. Now, most of this is going to be based on your perception and how it is that you apply SEO. For most people, right now is quite scary and unknown. We have some really seismic changes happening to search right now, mainly with AI, maybe with new entrants into the market like ChatGPT, etc. For those companies with budget, resources, and a reputation, I think this can be quite exciting because you have the chance to do something new and get ahead. But on the other side, entire niches have been disrupted, businesses have been wiped out or made unviable, and people have lost their livelihoods. So we cannot take that for granted. Your view on this time will rest on whether you fundamentally are winning or losing, and of course the fact that that status can turn sometimes on a dime. So, the next time someone asks you, what is better, subdomains or subfolders? You don't have to answer if it depends, and I'll tell you why. This has been something that's been debated in SEO for years, and irrespective of the arguments, from my point of view, I firmly believe that subfolders are better. So given no limitations, I would go down this route every time. But we all have to work with limitations. So if you've come to a project and you already have a subdomain with a well-established blog, and moving it to a subdirectory is placing some large technical changes and potential for things to become harder to maintain, I'd say it probably isn't worth the change. And it's hard, very, very hard to test, and fundamentally very hard to roll back if you do it wrong. If your current setup won't let you launch a new app on the same domain, or there are other complicating factors, well, a subdomain, if linked to properly, can do a good enough job. So I don't think it's worth losing sleep over. So the next time someone asks you,